All right, Larry, you're on, man.
Hey guys, this is Larry Yeager at Yeager's Cycle, and I thought maybe I'd go over a few things that we have come up on Polaris Rangers. Maybe mostly Ranger 1000s, whether it be the XP or the full size. It's kind of our most common machine, one we sell the most of. And you know, through the years, they've improved a lot of things. They've improved horsepower. They've improved clutch engagement, where they engage lower in engine RPM and smoother and easier. But all of that seems to maybe bring up different little issues along the way. And everything is so electronic that it will pick up certain codes that will maybe put the machine into a limp mode or something of that nature. And a lot of times there's really nothing wrong. It's just the system has sensed something that wasn't correct, and it puts it into a limp mode. And we have customers that'll buy a machine, take it home, and kind of in their first few days of ownership, they're kind of learning the machine and learning how to ride it, and this stuff comes up. And so, you know, it may be in an evening time, and they don't know how to get it going. They got to wait till the next day when they can call us, and we can help them out on the issue over the phone. But we thought maybe we would maybe address some of this stuff early on, and maybe get you maybe a little information on where you can heal this stuff yourself, and it won't, you know, impede your use of the machine. Probably one of the most common things we get is a call back within 1 hour of ownership that says it will not exceed 15 mile an hour. And the issue there normally is they haven't plugged their seatbelt in. It has a sensor on the seatbelt that if it's not plugged in, it will not exceed 15 mile an hour. So that's probably the most common call. Number two would be an issue where it's called brake acceleration correlation code. So if you happen to ride the vehicle and you got your foot on the throttle and you're accelerating above 10 mile an hour, and you have your foot on the brake, and it activates the brake lights back here, just enough to activate the brake lights, it thinks that it has a stuck throttle. That's what it believes. So it then goes into a limp mode, shuts it down where it'll only run 15 mile an hour. It also throws a code, so it stays in that mode. And that's been an issue that we've had some people call about. And it's simply a matter of riding with 1 foot on throttle, 1 foot on brake at a speed that it won't let you do that. And so you want to be cautious of that. And it doesn't take much. It's a matter of over a certain speed and hitting the brake enough that the electronic part of the brakes activate, and it senses it right then.
So no 2 foot driving, basically.
No 2 foot driving.
What that amounts to.
Yes, and if I understand that correctly, I'm not an engineer on these things, but we just kind of learn as we go. All of this is talked about above 10 mile an hour. So my Ranger a lot, I'll put my foot on the throttle and my foot on the brake when I'm in reverse, just to kind of control my reverse better, my backup speed.
Sure.
And that doesn't seem to be an issue. It's when you're going forward above 10 mile an hour that could be a problem. And that's a simple deal. We'll talk about how to clear the codes kind of after I'm all done. Another deal that we've had come up is a misfire code. So these, when I talked about how they've improved the clutch engagement, you take the old 900s and you take the old 800s, it took a lot more engine RPM to engage the clutch to make the vehicle go. And some people wasn't happy with that. So Polaris has addressed that by modifying their clutch engagement and engaging the clutch to the belt at a much lower engine RPM. Somewhere around 1600 RPM is where they're doing it now, which is really nice because you just touch the throttle and the thing wants to move for you. Now the negative with that is if you start this vehicle in gear, as soon as you start it, if it's a cold motor, it revs up past the clutch engagement engine RPM, which is about 1600. And then it sets all the parameters on the fuel injection system, and then the engine RPM starts coming down. Well, if you start it in gear, it can actually spin the clutch
fast
and engage
enough.
the clutch fast enough, then it will throw a misfire code. Because for an instant, as soon as that clutch touches the belt, it stalls that crankshaft just a touch. And when it does that, it throws a code. And so the fix for that is start it in neutral, start it in gear. And if you read your manual,
started in park.
I'm sorry, started in park.
Yep.
Yeah, started in park, started in park, started in neutral. That's the fix for that.
So if you're starting it in gear and you get that little lurch,
yes,
that can throw a code.
it can.
And then you have to go in and clear it like we talked about.
That's
We'll get to here in a minute.
That's correct. And it may not do it every time. It may not do it every time, but it can happen. So that is one of the issues we have people call back. Another thing too, and we try to talk with everybody about these clutches. So they have improved the belt burning problem on these because the engine RPM is engages to the belt much lower. But if you're not using low range properly, then you can still burn belts. And you want to make sure that if you're pulling a load, pulling heavy loads, you're using low range. If you're pulling a lot of people, you're using low range. You know, I kind of tell people if you're running less than 25 mile an hour, I'd use low range. And the clutch engagement is easier and smoother, and you have less issues with putting burn spots on the belt. When you put burn spots on the belt, then it makes for a notchy engagement. When you start giving it throttle, it's a real notchy engagement.
Kind of herky-jerky.
That is exactly correct, herky-jerky. And you don't want a herky-jerky buggy.
That's
buggies are
that's no good, man.
No, that's no good.
You want to eat jerky in your buggy, not.
Absolutely. That's right. That's right. But that can also cause a misfire code when that happens. So when you're accelerating, that clutch is squeezing on the belt. When it comes to a point where the belt is burnt and narrowed, the clutch will slip, and that quick instant will throw a misfire code. The engine thinks that the crankshaft is misfired, and it'll throw that code. It'll put it in limp mode as well.
Can I add something to that, Larry?
Yes.
I always like to remind people on the belts. The belt is it's the weakest point of the drive line by design. It's gonna slip if you're overworking it. You know, we would rather it slip than break an axle or create internal transmission damage or any of those issues. So if you're using that low range, you're giving the belt its best shot. But ultimately, it still can happen if you're using low and you're overworking it. But that's the beauty of the belt, is that it's the easiest part to change out if you do overwork them. It's the sacrificial part in that system. So
instead of a drive shaft,
yes,
prop shaft or transmission or something of that nature, that's what's going to give.
But using low is going to give it its best shot.
That's right. It slows that clutch rotation down, where it can grab that clutch much easier and pull it with it.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind. Another thing would be, we're not dealing with this right now because we're in the summertime, but we have some people call in the dead of winter when it's real cold out and they have a hard starting issues. We have learned that recommended to use 89 octane or better is what Polaris recommends, except for in the wintertime. They want you to use 87 octane in the wintertime. Reason is they do more
additives.
Yeah, winter additives to keep the fuel from freezing and those kind of things in the wintertime, to make the fuel last longer in the wintertime. Well, these little old fuel injected motors, it affects them. So that's why in the cold winter they recommend you use 87 octane. In the winter, and then the rest of the year they can use 89 octane. Just a little thing to keep in mind. Another thing is engine gets warm on you. You got a heat light comes on, but the fan's running. So the most absolute common thing, I mean, you can have a failure there. There's a fan, that maybe isn't working properly. You could be low on antifreeze. You could have a water pump failed, but the most common thing is to have a radiator clogged with fescue seed, grass seed, or mud, or both. And I'd say 90% of them that come in or say they're overheating, we find out that it simply just you need to clean the radiator out. So we take them into a low pressure power washer, blow the aluminum fins out with a power washer, and then blow them out with air, and get all that mud and all that fescue seed, just grass seed out of there, and that seems to heal most of it. So, if you're overheating, that's another issue to take a peek at. That is probably the most common things that we hear most days. Now, to clear codes, or if it's in a limp mode, there's a couple ways you can get it out of that. One is cycle the key on and off. Turn the key off, turn the key on, and that'll take it out of limp mode sometimes. The other way is to unhook the battery totally, positive and negative, unhook them, leave them for about 15-20 minutes. And it takes sometimes a little while for the system to clear the code out and get it out of limp mode. If that still doesn't work, then you need to bring it to us and we'll plug it into the system and make sure you don't have another issue going on. And if not, we'll clear the code and should be good to go.
So just to elaborate on that, Larry, those one-time codes like the belt slipping or the 2-foot driving thing, that's going to be a one-time code that you should be able to get that cleared out and then operate the machine as normal.
Correct.
If it's a persistent issue that is continuing to happen, then we need to see what's going on and why it continues to throw those codes.
That is 100% correct. So what it'll do, like let's say this 2-foot driving thing, it'll put it into a limp mode, but after a certain amount of time, it will call it a history code, and the vehicle will go back to running normal. It'll still have a code in there, but it's a history code.
Nice.
And then it goes right back to running. But if it continues, if it's a problem, you can't get it out by turning the ignition switch on and off or by unhooking the battery, then you may have something else going on that's more serious and we need to take.
Sorry, I got a phone call there.
That's all right.
All right, Larry, thanks a lot, man.
Hey, thank you.